The cop leaned into my window flashlight, shaking slightly in his hand, and said the words I still hear in my sleep. "Be honest with me, man. Someone like you doesn't just own a car like this." That's when I knew this wasn't about speeding anymore. It was about who he thought I was and who he had already decided I could never be. It was almost midnight, the road empty streetlights flicking by like a heartbeat slowing down. I had been driving fast, faster than I should have, because my phone had just lit up with 3 missed calls from the hospital and a message that said, "We're losing him." When you hear that as a doctor, everything else disappears. The speed limit, the cold air, even fear. All you see is a clock counting down inside someone else's body. I pulled over the second the lights came on, hands on the wheel like my father taught me interior light on window down. I thought if I stayed calm, if I spoke clearly, logic would take over. That was my first mistake. He didn't say hello, didn't ask if I knew why I was stopped. He looked at my car, then at my face, then back at the car and smirked. "Where'd you get it?" he asked. I told him the truth. "I'm a surgeon. I'm on my way to an emergency." He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Yeah, okay. Step out of the vehicle." 6 hours earlier, my life had been normal. Busy, but normal. I had just finished a long shift at Westbridge Medical Center. The kind where your feet ache but your chest feels full because patients are stable and families are smiling. I've been a trauma surgeon for over 15 years. I've cracked chests open in operating rooms that felt like war zones, held pressure on wounds that shouldn't have been survivable, talked to families at 3 in the morning when words feel useless. I don't do it for applause. I do it because once when I was a kid growing up on the South Side, a doctor saved my mother's life and I decided I wanted to be that calm voice in chaos. That night I had just gotten home. My daughter was asleep, my son had left his science project spread all over the table, my wife had kissed me and said, "Try to get some rest." My phone was on loud like always. When it rang, I answered before the first vibration stopped. Middle-aged male, internal bleeding, unstable vitals. No other trauma surgeon available. They needed me now. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and drove. Back on the roadside, the officer's hand hovered near his belt as I stepped out. The air was sharp, biting through my clothes. "Hands where I can see them," he said. I raised them slowly. I told him again calmly, "Sir, I'm a doctor. I have a patient dying right now." He rolled his eyes. Funny how everyone's got a story. He took my license, stared at it like it was a bad joke. Clean record. Local address. Still not enough. "What do you really do?" he asked. "Because this doesn't add up." I pointed to my hospital badge hanging from the mirror, my scrubs visible under my jacket. He didn't even look. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at it without moving my hands. He snapped, "Don't touch that." I said, "That's the hospital." He said, "I don't care." Minutes passed, then more. He searched my trunk, pulling out my medical bag, holding instruments like props in a bad interrogation. "What are these weapons?" he said. I told him they were surgical tools. He smirked. "Could be used as weapons." At one point, another driver slowed down and started filming from a distance. That only made things worse. The officer told him to leave, then turned back to me with a new kind of anger, like I had embarrassed him just by existing. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage. Fear, mixed with humiliation, mixed with the knowledge that somewhere a man was bleeding out while I stood on the side of the road explaining my own humanity. I tried reasoning. I tried pleading. I said, "Write me the ticket. Arrest me later if you want. Just let me go now." He leaned in close, his voice low. "You think you're special," he said. "You think you're better than everyone else?" Then came the line that broke me. "Get on your knees," he said almost casually, "if you're really begging." Before I could respond, another patrol car pulled up. A senior officer stepped out, older, quieter, with the kind of authority that doesn't need to shout. He took one look at the scene, the scattered supplies, my badge, the way I was standing with my hands still raised, and asked, "What's going on here?" The first officer started explaining, talking about speeding, about suspicion. The senior officer picked up one of my documents, read it, then looked at me. "Are you Dr. Marcus Reed?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to get to surgery." He asked for details. I gave them. He went pale, pulled out his phone and made a call. I heard him say a name, then stopped talking. His shoulders dropped. He turned to me slowly. "The patient," he said, his voice breaking, "is my brother." Everything froze. The noise of the road, the flashing lights, even my own thoughts. He looked at the officer who had stopped me like he was seeing him for the first time. "You held him," he said quietly. "You held the only surgeon who could save my brother." What happened next felt unreal. Badges were handed over. Orders were barked into radios. I was given an unmarked car and a clear route. As I drove, hands shaking on the wheel, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sick. Because it shouldn't take a personal connection for someone to be believed. It shouldn't take tragedy brushing up against power for justice to kick in. I made it to the hospital just in time. The surgery was brutal. Hours of controlled chaos, sweat pooling under my mask. My mind locked in on one thing only. We stabilized him. When I finally stepped out of the OR exhausted, the senior officer was waiting. His eyes were red. "He's alive?" he asked. I nodded. He broke down right there in the hallway. The fallout came fast. Videos surfaced. Statements were taken. The officer who stopped me was suspended, then fired. People argued online. Some said I should have just followed orders. Others said I was lucky. They missed the point. This wasn't about luck. It was about a system that sees threat before it sees truth. Weeks later, I went back to work like nothing had changed because for a lot of people like me, nothing ever does. But something had shifted inside. I stopped trying to be smaller, quieter, easier to swallow. I started speaking up even when my voice shook. Because silence doesn't save lives. Speaking up does. So here's my question for you. If I hadn't been a doctor, if that patient hadn't been connected to someone in power, how would that night have ended? How many stories like this never get told because the outcome wasn't survivable? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was I wrong for speeding? Was the officer wrong for assuming? Or is the real problem something bigger than both of us? Share this story. If you think these conversations matter, and tell me, what would you have done in my place?